So I have my midlife crisis, if you will, right?
Okay. At 35.
Yeah. Yep. I am divorced with 2 baby mamas and 3 children.
Yeah, you go into hardcore, don't you?
Yeah.
Get it all out of the way,
yeah,
right?
like, you know what, Steve? If you want to live an extraordinary life, you
Yeah.
have to go through some extraordinary things.
Hey, I'm Steve, and this is I'm Just Steve, the podcast. And today I have a friend, another Steve, Mr. Kick. Steve Kick is here with us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy and excited to be here, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, 2 Steves in a room, that could be trouble. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure, especially if you know us.
Yeah, I mean, Steves like to talk typically. I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't really met. My dad, Steve, isn't really a talker. He's more of an engineer-y type. I was named after my dad because I was born on his birthday, so that's why I'm a Steve.
Are you the second?
I'm Steven.
Or
I'm junior. I'm the junior.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the junior. I'm actually Steven, but I don't know. I just dropped the N eventually. Like legally, I can't, but like I did, and so like he's pissed half the time because he's like, "That's like you're taking my name," and I'm like, "Well, you gave it to me. You just."
You know what's even better about being a Steven?
Yeah.
Is I spell it with a PH. So I have the biblical spelling.
Yeah.
So it's even worse, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
because I go by Steve.
Right.
Nobody really calls me Steven. Only
Right.
my sister when she was mad at me growing up. You know, like not even my mom. It was my sister.
Yeah,
so.
it's definitely the N is the troubled name. Like you're in trouble and they add the N.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, if you've watched, which no one really has watched so far because we're just releasing
Haven't
our
launched
first
yet, right?
intro. Yeah, these are just sort of pre-recording to launch. But the idea behind the podcast, Steve, was trying to get to know other humans, right? And trying to get to know the real them, not just the social media them, right? Because we can put out whatever we want to and hold back a lot. But ultimately just also sort of understand the labels of the years of Steve, right? And the labels that humans put on ourselves or others and how that's helped us grow and how that's held us back, right?
Yeah.
So we don't really know each other very well.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, we do and we don't, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of social media, right? And the beauty of networking, if you would, where we've bumped into each other a lot. Actually, Ellen Grace wants me to be like your biggest fan, right? She's a loan officer and she's like, you need to know Kick. She came home from some event that you guys were hanging out at, and she's like, why don't you hang out with Kick more? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a good question. We just never have gotten to that spot.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of networking, for one.
Yeah.
Like, I had a chance to have a one-on-one conversation with another loan officer
Right.
who went back and told another realtor, hey, this person's cool. You should talk to them, right? And I
Right.
think people don't realize that that's what networking is for, right? You're building relationships. You're not just going there to be like, hey, send me a deal.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know where I was going with that, but Alan Grace, mentioning my name.
Yeah.
Where were we going with the rest of it?
I think the thing is, I'd like to learn more.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
About Steve. Like,
For sure.
where did you grow up? Like, tell me about Steve the kid. Like, who is Steve the kid and where did you come from?
Well, I grew up in Rockford.
Okay. Yeah.
So, if we start to unpack a little bit of that, I grew up in a Catholic household.
Okay.
So I grew up in a Catholic household. I don't go to Catholic church anymore.
Yeah.
Nothing against it.
Yeah.
Still great.
Was your family like practicing Catholic or were they holiday Catholic?
Nope, practicing. So
And
I got confirmed. I've gone through all of the,
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Catechism.
Okay.
All the great stuff.
Yeah.
So, yep. But I was really into sports growing up.
Okay.
Rockford's a great place to be into sports.
Parents are still up in Rockford?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. My parents still live in the same house that I grew up in.
Okay.
So,
Still together then?
yep.
Okay.
They
Awesome.
are. Yep. So,
Okay.
yeah. So went to Rockford High School.
Yeah.
I played football. That was my main sport. And
Okay.
that was kind of like, I think growing up and, as we flash forward a little bit here and I figure out who I am and, what's shaped me is I was so focused on sports and like that was going to propel me to the next thing or get me to where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
That I wasn't focusing on who I really was as a person, right? So there was like me, the athlete that I thought I needed to be, and I got
And
good
Rockford
grades.
sports is big. It was probably big then.
Rockford
just
football
massive
is
now, right?
Like it's a big deal. So,
it's a big deal, right? Yeah.
You know, I was.
What did you play? What was the position?
I was a defensive back and
Okay.
a cornerback. Yep.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I was the captain.
Okay,
I was
captain.
all state. You know.
Okay.
So like I was kind of, you know.
Yeah, you were.
It was kind of a big deal,
yeah,
right?
You were a
If
big
wanna,
deal.
Which
Yeah.
again, you know, like puffs your ego up, and I think I tried to not be so egotistical, but at the end of the day, I think, you know, we're all working from our ego. Our ego is our mind, you know, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, I played sports. I got good grades. You know, my education was always something that was, you know, very important. My mom was a teacher.
Okay.
Grand Rapids Public Schools.
Okay.
30 plus years.
Wow. What grade?
Retired now.
Did she teach?
Gosh, she was SSLI, so it was more like
Student learning.
so severely speech and language impaired children.
Yeah.
So she was pulling children out of classrooms. So it was like all different grades.
Yeah.
But
that takes a huge heart.
absolutely, most patience of anyone I've ever met.
Yeah.
She's a saint. Love her.
Yeah.
BB, you're great. Love you, Mom.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I also got to see another side of, like, I guess, reality, right? I mean, my mom was teaching in Grand Rapids Public Schools.
Yeah.
And
which is my alma mater. I went to Ottawa.
oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Again, you know, like I knew that from afar, but like didn't remember it because we just haven't had enough conversations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that allowed me to see a different side of things, really, right? Grand Rapids Public Schools is different than Rockford, right?
Right,
So,
for sure.
you know, it's kind of a dose of reality, but also sports, I think, blends, you know, like, I don't know how to say this, but, you know, diversity. There's, you know, in sports, it's like the ultimate equalizer. It doesn't matter what color your skin is, right? And so that's one thing that I like and love about sports is, like, nobody cares what you look like.
Right.
If you're a good athlete, you know, then they want to be on
when
your
you suit
team.
up, you're suiting up, right?
Yep.
Like
exactly. So, yeah, you know, I did that, and then I ended up going to Grand Valley.
Did you have siblings growing up?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Older brother, older sister.
Older
all
brother.
2 years apart. So I'm the youngest.
You're the youngest?
Yep.
Okay.
My brother is 2 years older. My sister is 4 years older than me.
Okay. Were you close to them or?
Very. Yep.
Okay. And still or no?
It's complicated for sure. My brother lives in Mexico, so I don't see him
Really?
a whole
Okay.
lot. He comes back every so often and does some physical therapy. That's what he's a physical therapist. So,
Okay. Why did he move to Mexico? Do you know?
I can't answer that question for him, but I know that they love the warm temperatures. I mean, can't blame them there.
Blame him. I'm going in January.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, I mean, we're heading into another winter here, and it's just like, why do I do this again? Why do I, you know? So that summer or that winter home, you know, snowbirds, it's a real thing, right?
Right, for sure.
For sure. And LMCU, you know, my employer.
Oh, yes.
Which
We'll
get
shout
into
out.
that. Which I want to make sure that we say this. My thoughts and opinions are my own opinions and not of my employer. So I just want to make sure I love where I work. But you know, these are my thoughts, my ideas. So
for sure.
Anyway, you know, I ended up going to Grand Valley as well. Played football there for 2 years. Was part of a national championship team in 2005.
At Grand Valley?
Yep.
Okay.
So, and also Rockford did not win their first state championship until the year after I graduated.
Oh, you set the team up.
That's what I'm thinking, right? Right? You know,
like, you know,
and then they won a lot of state championships after that. So,
you know, someone's got to build it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
sometimes, you know, you don't get to be there after it's built. You just build it and you let others, you know, run it. Yeah.
No, I will take no credit for building any part of that program. Ralph Munger did a great job of building that up, you know, and it's still going strong. So, but it was interesting to see that and then go to Grand Valley, you know, and be a part of a national championship team was pretty cool.
Did you pick Grand Valley because of football? Like, did you like get a scholarship or you just were allowed to play? What?
It was, again, it's kind of complicated, you know, being a really, you know, I guess, you know, I was D1 All-State, you know. I didn't get a lot of offers. And then...
Okay, because we're going to label you as short. Is that why? Or,
You know,
because we were talking about that, right, beforehand.
it definitely factors into
Yeah.
it. And, you know, being a defensive back or whatever, I don't know if I was fast enough or,
Okay.
you know, like
They have all their
things,
metrics,
right? Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, but I think too, when I ended up going to Grand Valley, I was what they call a preferred walk-on. So Jamie Hosford made a connection with the coach, and part of it was Grand Valley was transitioning. Chuck Martin was becoming the head coach. Brian Kelly was leaving. So there's a lot of turmoil and stuff and turnover with recruiting. But I got a spot on the team through this mutual connection. My dad, I was 50-50 on whether or not I wanted to play
ball in college.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
you didn't get a scholarship, so you felt funny, or just because you were sure if you wanted to continue on?
I had opportunities to walk on at, you know, my cousin had a connection at Michigan. I could have gone there had I, you know, really wanted to play. And I unfortunately, I was at a point, I think, where my heart wasn't in it fully, you know?
Played so many years that
and
you just were exhausted with it, you think?
I think it comes down to me, again, not knowing who I was, right?
Yeah.
Like, and as you're growing up, you're like, well, you know, unfortunately, I'm like, well, I'm not going to play professional football. So, like, you know, because I'm, you know, not tall enough, fast enough, strong enough, or whatever label you want to put on that. Which, again, is like, I wish I would have never heard those things, right? Because people
those
were like,
labels,
well, you're not going to be, you know, you're not tall enough, right? And all those things. So I mean, it's tough. So it was like, I'm not going anywhere with this. So it's just for the love of the game, if you will, right? And I put so much into it in high school. Like, I worked my butt off in high school to be the best person I could be. Yeah. And I think when it ended, and it was just like, I think there was and it was there also like, I think maybe I was just tired of it, you know, like, because it was almost like everything was based around training for football and becoming better for football and doing all these things, and life existed and exists in the other moments, right? And
how has that affected your raising of your children, right? Do you, like, your daughters are in gymnastics, right? I don't know if your dude is playing any sports, but how does that mentally, like, now that you have that clarity, right? How do you balance, like, pushing them to be the best they can be, right? Because I think every parent wants them to be as good, if not better, than ourselves. But also with the knowledge of, like, wait, like, I missed out on some part of life because I was so focused on that one thing. How do you find that you pull them back from trying to go too far into it? Like, where do you stop and start with that knowledge with now your kids?
Well, you know, there's pros and cons to everything, right? And athletics has been such a positive thing in my life when I look at it. Knowing, you know, I've come a long way mentally and healed a lot and changed a lot with who I am. And knowing that and coming from that perspective as a parent, I feel like it's easier to see if they're struggling in one thing or they're not putting enough in one area where you can kind of coach them up. It's been interesting. I think when I played sports, I don't know if it was because I had older brother and sister and I was always hanging out with older kids. Excuse me. But I was a good athlete. So like whatever sport I played and put my passion into, I was pretty good at, you know.
So like, you would say you were naturally gifted. Athletic?
And
two of my kids are that. Out of the 4, I have 7, but the 2 that like are mine, right? Which actually aren't mine because they're adopted.
Which
so they're
is
mine,
amazing in and of itself.
But like mine are not athletic because they're mine, right? Like genes are an actual thing, right?
Right.
You know, but the other 2, Peyton and Nico, they're naturally athletic, right? And you're like, oh wow, that's what naturally athletic looks like, right? Like they could do just pick up any sport and just start playing, and be one of the top kids without even trying. And you're like, that's ridiculous.
Do they have older siblings?
Well, yeah, because they have Elliot and Sawyer, right?
So I do think that, like, being younger sibling in the pecking order definitely helps in that respect. My youngest is, you know, I would say appears to be the most naturally gifted.
Yeah.
But I think it's because she has two older siblings who are
Right.
in sports, and
Right.
she's trying
So
to
what are
keep
the
up with
kids'
them.
names again and ages?
So I have Brad, he's 13,
Brad 13.
and Zoe is 9,
Yeah.
and Sloan is 6.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Sloane's the one right now.
Sloan, well, they're all great in their own respect,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think where I'm getting is they are all very athletic.
Yeah.
All of them are.
Yeah.
But I was on the A team for basketball, right? And my son was on the rec team. They have an A, B, and a rec team, and he's been on the rec team the last 2 years. He's a
Yeah.
great athlete, and I love him. He tries hard,
Yeah.
but like he's not on the A team, and he still continues to go and play. And I have so much respect for that because
Yeah.
I know, like, I don't know if mentally I would have been able to handle that, right?
Right.
If I wasn't on the A team, if I was on the B team or whatever,
Was that instilled from your parents, or was that instilled on from you? Like, did your dad push you to be athletic and be on the A team? And then your son, you're just happy with him playing, right? I feel like, was that a change from your childhood compared to how you're trying to raise your children? Not that your childhood was bad, or that I'm not trying to put words in, but
no, and I don't blame my parents for anything, that they did or didn't do, but I think it was because I was naturally gifted and athletic, it led to more opportunities to be in sports.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of what we did. And I enjoyed it. I
Right,
mean, at the
right.
end of the day,
You wanted to do
I
it.
loved it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I wanted
Yeah.
to be the best that I could be,
Yeah.
so I pushed myself hard in that. So there's no negativity about it, but
Yeah.
in that push and that grind to be a better athlete, I didn't really develop myself personally, right? Or focus
Right.
enough on that. I
Yeah.
think, I wasn't grounded enough, I think is what the term I would say.
How are you then trying to help your kiddos be grounded? I guess that's right, because you've said that a number of times.
Take their shoes off.
To take their shoes off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and walk on the earth.
Yeah, is
right?
that
literally?
I know that's
figuratively
a thing, right?
and literally.
Yeah.
I do. I practice grounding.
Right. Do you have the grounding sheet where you plug in the sheet at night?
Not yet.
Not
but
yet.
I wanna
But
get
it's
one.
on the list. Is that
Yeah.
on the Christmas list?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you wear the barefoot shoes at times, or no?
No.
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 Okay.
I just take my
you
shoes
just
off
take
and
your
I
shoes
walk
off
around barefoot.
and socks.
I golf barefooted now.
You golf barefooted?
Yeah, it's crazy.
How do you not slide?
Do
Do you just have the calluses now, or little spikes because you're so
think
grounded,
about
or
this,
what?
Steve? When your feet can feel the ground,
Yeah.
how good your footing is, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that's a good, I'm thinking of the word, but when your feet are on the ground and you know your footing, you're in a solid, good position, right? And I think that's what being grounded means, from a mental perspective.
Yeah.
And
Where
not
did you
just a
come up
physical.
with that? Was that something you read, or is that just something that you've grown into, this idea of grounding, not just the practice, but in the analogy that you're using?
Well, I think it was a part of my maturity process, and I think
When did that start?
we haven't even talked about what we came on here to talk about, which I think
we'll get to. We got time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was a part of me, becoming and grounded, if you will.
Okay.
But really the journey started with yoga for me.
Yeah.
As I was going through my divorce.
Yeah. Which was how long ago?
4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. It was. Yeah. So I wanted to find something to get myself moving again.
Okay.
I wasn't being physically active enough, and I had done P90X in the past.
Oh,
and there's a yoga X in there.
Yeah.
But it's super long, right? It's 90 minutes long, and but
the whole bar
did,
on the side of the isn't the Phoenix? Didn't they have the bar that you put across your door frame and stuff like that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pull-ups and push-ups and stuff
okay.
like that with it. Yep, for
I
sure.
don't feel like I hear P90 that much anymore.
You know,
It's like all 75 hard now.
Yeah, it had its time, but it worked really well when I did it. I'll be honest.
Okay.
You know, like
Which
it was a good program.
Being athletic,
Tony Horton, you know, man, the guy was like 50, I think, when he did the program. And just shredded.
How did you stay motivated to actually do the program yourself?
What for
P90?
Man, we are really jumping around here.
We are. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how my brain works too. You know, like we were talking about something earlier.
We'll go back. I
had a whole point that I was gonna get to, but I got into the other story, and then I'm like, wait a minute, what was I? You know, it happens to me too often. But
sorry.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun, isn't it?
It is.
So yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yeah,
we're
yoga.
talking about P90
yoga
and yoga.
Yeah.
And grounding,
so I liked the Yoga X, but it was just really long. But I was like, hey, I got this email or some kind of marketing thing that was like, it was like $40 for unlimited hot yoga.
Okay.
At Funky Buddha. So here's my shout out, Funky Buddha.
Yeah. You're still there? Do you still hang there?
I don't go to hot yoga right now.
Okay.
I still practice yoga at home, but I'm not currently going to hot yoga.
Okay.
It's, you know, with a new year approaching, it's something that I wouldn't mind getting into, but I actually want to get a membership to a gym for my children so that, you know, basketball has started to become a thing for all of my children. So place to shoot hoops and go during the winter is nice. So
the why is great.
Yep, that's the plan. Yep, that's the plan.
I'm an MVP and I like it, but it's not as child oriented. Like the why when the kids were younger was just like, perfect.
Yeah, definitely. So looking forward to that in the new year here, but went to Funky Buddha, got into hot yoga, and it was like something changed, a light bulb went off or whatever. And the thing about yoga is it requires you to be mentally present. Like you can't get into these crazy ass poses if you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you can focus on. You're focusing on your breathing and not falling over or, you know, like, and so it brings you down to, you know, this state where you're present in the moment. And when I started realizing that you can enjoy the moment and be present in the moment, that's when things started changing for me.
Okay.
And my mind started changing.
Yeah.
I think for me, I don't know where I uncovered this, but I have something called ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. And so I have a buddy who I think it's called Mind Mavericks. Troy Rice is his name. But he does a lot of great stuff on social media. And he was talking about automatic negative thoughts. And I listened to this video and I'm like, holy shit, can I swear on this podcast?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it was like,
you.
holy shit, you know, like I've been suffering from this my whole life, you know, like a manager calls me on my cell phone and I'm like, what did I do wrong?
Right away, your brain goes there.
Why am I thinking that, right?
Yeah.
You know, why am I thinking that?
Do you think that's from the athletic side, that the coaches would point out the negative more than the positive?
You know, I've had a lot of different coaches and I don't think I can necessarily pinpoint where that came from. But I realized that I've always
I was gonna say, is that like, can you remember back being 5 or 6?
I don't know where it came. Yeah, I don't know where it came from, but from as far back as I can remember, it was like, I don't know if it's a scarcity mindset or what, you know, but it's like, why do you always jump to the conclusion that it's a bad thing happening to you when it should be like, hey, they're calling you to say great job on this or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that anxiety that I've had, you know, and everyone has different forms of anxiety, I think, you know, and we have better ways of managing it, and some people are better at it than others. But we all have anxiety, and that's where, you know, a lot of my anxiety came from.
Okay.
And so I started rethinking how I was thinking. And in order to do that, you have to be mindful of what you're actually thinking.
Yeah.
And so it's weird, but you can start catching yourself having those negative thoughts and then redirecting your mind to say, nope, we're good. We're positive. Answer the phone call, make the phone call. You know, in our business, you're in real estate, I'm in mortgages. Like, we have call reluctance, and it's like, why? For what reason, right? What's the worst that can happen? They don't answer the phone call.
Right.
Right. And you leave them a message or you don't, but whatever.
Right.
The best thing is you have a great conversation and you either get a deal out of it or you have a new friend or whatever it is. Right.
Right.
So,
right. You built another human connection.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
let's back up a minute. And you went to Grand Valley. You got married. You had kids. Right.
well, it's more complicated than that.
Do you want to unpack that for
Yeah,
me?
for sure. So,
And for audience.
yeah, absolutely. So I have 3 children.
Yeah.
But I have 2 baby mamas.
Two baby mamas, okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So my son Brad is with Samantha Treeweiler. She's married now, and they have he has a brother.
Cool.
On that side, love it. But we were a statistic, right? Where it happens, and
How old were you?
I was 25 when.
how old was she?
In 26 when Brad was born.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was 23.
Okay.
So 24 when Brad was
Yeah.
born. So anyway, we're these young children.
Yeah.
I had just started working at LMCU.
Isn't it interesting that we say young children at 25?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because my mom, I think, had all 5 of us by the time she was 20.
Yeah.
Which
And
was,
none of my friends
she shouldn't
had
have had us,
children
but anyway,
at that
yeah.
age either.
Yeah. Right.
None of my friends have, or not very many of them have a 13-year-old
That's not normal anymore, right? Yeah.
So I got into the game early, if you will,
Yeah.
And growing up in a Catholic household, there's a lot of
guilt
and
Yeah.
stuff like that
Yeah.
built into it. And again, I'm not trying to make any labels for any religious groups or anything either, but I felt that guilt.
And you felt that label of being a failure that you had a
sinner,
child?
right?
A sinner. Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah,
So,
because it is considered a sin to have sex before marriage and then to have a baby, right? Out of wedlock, right?
Yep.
So many different labels there quickly.
So
right?
you think about that, right? And what that did to my
Did you
mental,
struggle with that at that period, or were you still just young and you're like, oh wow, whatever? Like, did you fall into that thinking of like, oh man, my family, how I was raised, I have failed because of all of this period of my life?
At times, I think I struggled with it, but the way that I was built and the way that I am is like I'm always like moving and pushing forward.
Okay.
So it was like maybe I don't even know if I realized it at the time, but it was like I just kept plugging away one day at a time, right? And thankfully, we don't have a legal agreement between me and his mom.
Yeah.
It's just we split them 50-50. We
That's
try to
awesome.
split the cost 50-50.
And it's always been the case?
Yep.
Okay.
Which is not common, right? I mean,
Right.
we've been able to co-parent and have a healthy
That's
relationship
amazing.
together.
Yeah.
So I'm super thankful for that and
Yeah.
still am. And we continue. She actually watched him for me last night. I had a
Okay.
holiday get together yesterday that I went to for the HBA of Grand Rapids. And my mom watched my daughters and his mom watched him. So it's cool. Hey, I said, hey, can you watch him for me tonight? She said, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's very nice, to have that opportunity and the ability to,
Co-parent.
hand
And
our
be
kids
adults,
back and forth
right?
and be like, hey,
Yeah.
you get extra time. Like, I want to be
Yeah.
the person that gets the first opportunity to watch, my
Yeah.
kid if you need help, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been great, and it was great for when I ended up getting married and then going through a divorce after having children again.
Yeah. And you were married for how long?
It was 3 years. We were together for 6 years.
Okay.
So if we're going to unpack learning lessons here, my ex-wife also got pregnant before we got married.
Okay.
So
So you're
I learn
9-year-old.
lessons, Steve, but sometimes I'm
Sometimes it
slow
takes
to
a
learn.
couple.
Yeah, sometimes we're slow to learn these lessons here.
I get it.
Like,
I'm with you, buddy. I can give you dozens where I'm like, oh yeah, I did that again. Why did I do that again?
right. Yeah, I didn't learn this time.
Yeah.
And I'm right back into the thick of it. Right.
Right.
And
So your ex-wife then gets pregnant
Yep.
before you're married again.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. And then was
And,
it like, do the right thing? Let's get proposed and let's go, or were you prepared to do that anyways?
Yeah, no, there was the pressure of like, all right, you've done this the second time. But I think there was so much going on that it was hard to figure out us as a couple, right?
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, I hadn't really figured out who I was yet, right?
Yeah.
And in order to be a
Because
good
you were
partner,
how old then? 30?
so
31? Well, she's
I'm,
9. You're
I'm
39.
39. Yeah.
So
yeah.
30.
So I was 30. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 29, 30.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. I think my son was what, like 3
Yeah.
or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, that going through that experience again, you also kind of like get some thick skin too, right?
Right.
Because you're like, well, I keep screwing up here, so like ultimately, I knew I was a good person. I
Right.
think deep down inside,
Right.
but it was like, you can be a good person, but also make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Or have the right intentions, but
Yeah.
do something wrong, right?
Did someone say you screwed up again, or did you just say that to yourself?
I think it was more me thinking
Yeah.
that, like
Yeah.
the labels we put on ourselves,
Right.
right? That we think
Right.
society, like, that society is gonna,
Judge you because
Yeah.
of that? Yeah. They do though, right? Like society does. Let's
oh,
be honest.
absolutely. I mean, I'm
Right?
sure that like there's probably been plenty of conversations about, oh my gosh, look at this guy,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what is he doing?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like you can't live your life around what other people think about you.
Yeah.
And I cared way too much about what people thought about me growing up.
Yeah.
Way more than I thought I did even,
yeah,
like you try
yeah.
to act like you're cool and you don't care, but like deep down inside you care.
Yeah, I don't think there's any human that doesn't care,
Right.
right? If
Right.
they put off the persona that they don't care, I think it's just that
Disingenuous.
Yeah, because it's just like, how do you not? Like, I'm sorry, like if you're a human, we're built to be together, right? As humans, and it's like, okay, well, if I don't care what other people think around me, then I don't want to be part of any tribe, and that would be very lonely, right?
Yeah.
And I've had those moments where it's like, okay, I'm gonna wash away every tribe and start over, right? And let me just do my own thing. I don't care what all these other noises are. But then it's like, well, there's depression coming quickly, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't do it alone in life.
Right.
Like you just can't, right? So yeah, I think it's pretty ingenuine and disgenuine when people are like, oh yeah, like what people say doesn't bother me. It's like, okay, yeah, I get that with like tools. There's plenty of tools out there of people that like, yeah, you shouldn't care what they say because they really have no idea who you are, or their opinion really shouldn't matter. But
Yeah.
we're still human, right? It still
Absolutely.
hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm not sure where we were going. Oh yeah.
So kiddos.
So
and,
now,
like,
so now I've got 2 kids that
Yeah.
I've had, out of wedlock. And
And we're, like for those that are watching, I just want to stop for a second and just say, like, we're in West Michigan, right? And so West Michigan is its own unique bubble, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by bubble is, I mean, lots of folks know the Catholic Church, right? But lots of people do not know West Michigan Church, right?
Yeah.
Like the society in which West Michigan is built from the Reformed background of the Christian Reformed Church and the Reformed Church being here locally. Like there's a church on every corner.
Yep.
Right. If you don't go to church, you almost feel like you need to apologize for it, which I think you kind of did at the beginning, right? I'm Catholic, but I'm not practicing, but I
do go to church. So I go to Keystone.
Yeah.
So shout out there.
Yeah.
Very open church.
Brady's.
From my
Brady's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
great.
remember
Love it.
Brady back in the day when he was at Ada Bible Church, and he would have like a stuffed animal all the time. Like
Really?
Yeah.
I've never seen him with a stuffed animal.
He probably left those at Ada. But yeah, he used to do a lot of the Christmas sermons, and he was the youth pastor at Ada. And so he would bring out like stuffed lambs and stuff, right?
Yeah. So you're familiar with him, though, So that's like that's the West Michigan thing,
that's
though, too,
so
right?
everybody, and so I think like for the audience that don't know, West Michigan is very religious, right? Religious not just in the, I mean, we're vocally religious, right? Of this is right or wrong, and we're unfortunately in West Michigan, really quick to point out the sins of others without, what's the verse where you take the speck out of your own eye first, right?
Yeah.
Where it's very easy.
An eye
West,
for an eye makes the whole world blind. Is that
right?
what you know?
Yeah. So it's very. So I just wanted to make sure that those that are watching that aren't from here, when you say out of wedlock, there's lots of cities that'd be like, "What are you talking about?" That is how you have a baby, right?
It's my perception growing up in a Catholic household.
That's the lens that you grew up in, right?
Having children out of wedlock was bad,
right?
And I'm not proposing having children out of wedlock, right?
No. But it's interesting that we
it happens more often than you'd think, right?
Yeah, and how we as West Michigan, again, on the podcast I've started talking as I'm interviewing people about the lenses that we wear, right? And so you don't really know a human because you until you have these conversations, you're trying to understand when I say lens, the upbringing that they had, all the experiences that they had that bring them to whatever their perceived reality is now, right? So you've gone through all these things to be Steve Kick now, but because of where you grew up, the household you grew up, we have then what we believe is right or wrong, right? And then we as adults in our 40s, I'm in my 40s, you're up getting there.
I'm almost there, 39.
Almost there. I won't claim it yet for you. We have these ideals, right? So it's interesting to hear that verbiage come out. Like, not that, again, we're saying that you should have babies before you're married or whatever, but it's the shame that comes with it is different in West Michigan than I think the shame that you would feel. You would be scared. I don't care who you are. I think you're scared, right? Like, oh man, what is life going to look like? I'm having a baby, right?
And you are, whether or not you're married.
It doesn't matter. When you're bringing, that moment is there, right?
I'm going to be responsible for someone else. I'm not even responsible for myself at this point. I mean, let's be honest. If we're being honest here, right. I'm still trying to grow up.
Yeah. So backing up, you second kid on the way, and I'm
killing it in the statistics game here, aren't I?
Right. And you're trying to figure out
in a bad way.
You don't even know who you are. You're saying, right? You're just you're doing loans at that time. Are you? What are you doing for a career?
So to back up a little bit further, career-wise, so I've worked at LMCU, Lake Michigan Credit Union, for 15 years, over 15 years now. I've been a member there for over 30. So
when they had like one office,
Grand Rapids Teachers Credit Union was the name of it when I joined. My mom, being a Grand Rapids public school teacher, so she opened me an account, and loved it. And I had friends who were working there out of college. It was 2009. Yeah, unemployment was
unreal,
crazy.
Yeah, I couldn't
even get anyone to call you back. I'm submitting resumes everywhere. I've got a college degree.
Yeah, that's where most people just left, right? I mean, we had so many college students leaving to go to Chicago and just to get out of West Michigan, right?
Yep, definitely. And so I had buddies working at LMCU, and I was bartending at the time.
Okay. I could see you being a great bartender, by the way.
I was a good bartender.
Yeah.
But, we had too much fun. And I'm glad that part of my life is over, you know?
What was your favorite drink to pour?
Well, I worked at Duke's, so we didn't pour a lot of, I would say, classy cocktails. It was more like, can I have 8 shots of Jaeger? Go to the Jaeger machine and pour it out. So it wasn't like, I wasn't doing any flair or
you weren't spinning the bottles or anything. No, you didn't have like a signature move.
We might have been playing spin the bottle, but I wasn't spinning any bottles. All
right. Okay.
So
So you started.
So I'm ready to. I've got a college degree. I'm ready to move on in my career, but can't find anything. But I have friends working at LMCU, so I'm like, hey, I'm gonna try and be a teller there. Apply, and I get a job. I put some names on my resume, which one of the people didn't really know me, but he was a friend of a friend. Yeah. And we ended up becoming best friends. Okay. But he didn't know that I put my name on my resume or whatever as a.
He knows now, I'm assuming.
Yep. And he that's one of our running jokes. He was in my wedding, super close. But Yeah, so I get a job there as a teller, right?
Teller. Yeah, just ground up.
Frontline employee, do that for a hot minute, and then I'm a member service representative or personal banker, as most people would know it.
Right. So you're in the glass, and you come
the
out to the
cubicles or
person
whatever.
that's sitting in the chair and help them with their whatever.
Yeah, like doing loans,
Yeah,
auto
car loans, those kinds of stuff.
stuff like that, opening new accounts.
Yeah.
So I really, you learn the company when you're there, right?
Yeah.
Like you really learn.
Well, and customer service, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and just about like as a teller, you have to know a little bit about every part of the
I
company.
feel like 50% of the people sitting in those chairs were angry with their accounts, right? Like you're fixing something 50%
You're the face
of the
of
time.
the credit union as a teller and an MSR, and they deal with a lot of stuff because that's why people are coming in usually, right?
Right,
They're usually coming in when they have a problem, right?
Yeah.
Especially nowadays with technology and things being available online.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm a personal banker for a little while, and then funny story for getting into my career is I'm a MSR at this branch, and I befriend a mortgage loan officer.
Okay.
And
Is this mortgage officer still around?
yep, Ken
that?
Fussman.
Oh, yeah, Kenny. Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
gotta drop his name.
Yep.
So Kenny was the loan officer at my branch,
Okay.
and we, I'm in his office one day,
Yeah.
and he shows me a paycheck of what he made last month, and
Yeah.
he made more in 1 month than I
you're gonna
made
make
the
the year.
entire year before,
Yeah.
and that was my light bulb moment where I'm like, I want to do what that guy
I could
does.
use that money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that is the initial thing where I was like, all right, that's something I'm interested in. So fast forward to my son, my son is coming along here.
Yeah.
He's about to be born, and I'm like, I need to make more money to provide for my family,
Yeah.
right? Because there's that,
Yeah.
again, that label, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that
The
insecurity.
male is a provider.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but how am I gonna be a mortgage loan officer? I have no experience. Well, I got into mortgage loss prevention. So,
Okay. Yeah. Which
yeah.
was in the heyday.
Yep.
At that point, right?
Yeah. Well, the good thing about the company I work for is we were really good about helping, like, and that's the approach that I took is like,
Yeah.
I was a collector is what they
Yeah.
call it to begin. And you're calling on accounts that are past due, right? We're
Right.
trying to collect the payment.
Right.
And man, you talk about like a tough job, right?
Yeah.
But also like really setting me up for success because I see
because
the
that's when I
back
started
end.
my real estate.
Yeah.
Right. Like I started with people crying at the table, right? Where I was at their listing appointment and they had to sell because they were 3 months behind and lost jobs and everything. And they're like, what do we do, Steve?
Right.
Like, I don't like, and I wasn't the person that sold them the house. It would be really different now with being in this for 18 years to go and be like, if we had another crash and have to meet with all these people that I said like, hey, you're good to go. This is a great house, a great price. And then all of a sudden to see like 40% of their value just gone in a year's period of time and their jobs being gone. Like, boy, I don't know how I would do that at this moment in life. Right. Like,
For sure.
so yeah, that was a tough season to learn, but it was a good learning where you're like, oh, wow. Okay. Like,
yeah. Like we're coming up with payment plans to keep people in their homes.
Right.
I mean, and that was the great thing. Like it wasn't like, hey, we're trying to get this payment.
Yeah.
It was like, how do we set these people up for success and also work with them?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we didn't have a lot of delinquency to begin with.
Yeah.
But for what I do now as a mortgage loan officer, seeing the back end of where people can go to, you also kind of have a responsibility to make sure that you try and educate people enough to make them financially responsible to have a mortgage, right? Like this is an important piece.
Right. Which is hard because they don't sometimes want that advice, right? They just want the thing they want.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Quick and easy.
Yeah,
They
and
don't
you're in
want
the
a
way.
2-hour meeting,
Yeah.
but like I was thinking about that on the way out here. Like I just had a meeting with clients and they were in my office for 2.5 hours and we could have kept going, but I actually had to go somewhere.
Right.
I had to kick them out of my office because I'm like, sorry, I got to go pick up my kids.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I got a great perspective and I was collecting for a little bit and then I became a mortgage early default counselor, which was you actually are like sending out the packages for like foreclosures and stuff like that because it's a very detail oriented process.
Yeah.
And then also if someone wanted to do a short sale, I was reviewing the documents, ordering a BPO,
Okay,
broker's price opinion, which is like an appraisal for people who don't know what a BPO is. It gives the value of the house, and then going to our VP of risk and saying whether or not I thought it was a good idea or not for us to move forward with this short sale, right? So again, a truly unique perspective, and I only did that for about, 3 or 4 months before I got my job as a mortgage loan officer at LMCU. So I've been doing that.
Did you start in-house or did you start at a branch?
Yep.
You're in the call center?
I really had no experience. I didn't know what I was doing. So
Which LMCU likes to do, right? The call center seems to be a place that a lot of people get their start.
It's a great training ground, right? The leads are coming in, right? You're not having to go out and actively,
Pursue,
not that some of them aren't doing that and helping their friends, family, and doing that kind of stuff and promoting themselves, but the leads are coming in. And at that time, it was HARP. So I get into the business. It's kind of like you sit down in there. The formal training sometimes is like isn't always there. It was like, hey, I listened to a guy talk to people on the phone for a couple weeks, and then I entered the information, learned the loan applications, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, are you ready? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and you're on the phone lines taking live applications, right? Like. Trial by fire a little bit. And unfortunately in the mortgage business, in order to learn, that's just kind of how it has to be.
Well, that's real estate business. I mean, that's agents
you won't
too,
learn
right?
stuff from a classroom.
It's like, here's your 40-hour class, pass your test and then go the next day and sell somebody a whatever price house, right? It's like with no knowledge of the things, right?
Exactly.
Which I'm grateful for. Right. Everybody, a lot of people that have been in the business for a long time are like, hey, we need to change this. There needs to be a lot more hours. They should have a college degree. And I'm like, man, I wouldn't be where I'm at if all that was required. Like, I'm dyslexic, ADD. You talk about the labels. I got plenty of them that would have stopped me from the opportunity that I've been able to be in for the last 18 years. Because it was like, okay, I think I can handle a 40-hour class and I think I can pass this test. But after that, then now I can do it. But if they were making me do a college degree or something else, I probably still would be in the trades.
Right.
Which, nothing wrong with the trades, but it would have been, very different.
Yeah, and I mean, how times have changed, right? Like, if my kids say they want to go into the trades, I'm like, heck yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'll help you run the business, right? So it's interesting. Like, I grew up, education is great, and I am a huge proponent of education. But college isn't for everyone, right?
Sure.
But it was definitely like, you got to go to college, right? But anyway, going back to the mortgage piece is, I start doing mortgages after that, short period in mortgage.
Son's born, you're a mortgage officer.
Yep. Become a mortgage officer. So he was, let's see, I started in the business in 2013. So he was born in 2011, so he was two, I think, when I started in the mortgage business. Okay. And so, I have this newborn son, and I had actually made a friend in early default counseling and that side of the business, who ended up coming over to mortgages, and then ended up becoming my wife. Gabrielle Kick.
That's where you guys met.
So Gabe for short.
She was an in-house loan officer too, right?
Yep. But we met in mortgage loss prevention.
Okay.
And then I went over to mortgages, and we were hiring. And she was looking for something different, and I was like, hey, I think you'd be great for this. So, and we were both with other people. I was with Sam still, and anyway. But then we both ended up becoming single at the same time. And, we hung out as friends. My cousin was coaching a football team. She went to Granville. I went to Rockford, rivals in high school. And my cousin, who went to Granville as well, knew her. And he was coaching at Granville at the time. So we were like, hey, Rockford's playing Granville. Let's go watch the game.
Sure.
And it wasn't supposed to be a date, but it kind of turned into a date. Sure. And, fast forward a little bit. I end up, we end up getting pregnant together. And we got married. And, as we unpack it again, in all of this, there's career changes happening. There's children being born.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to, you know, be successful and build this, you know, this thing. And
Did it feel like, now that you look back, did it feel like life was just flying by and you were just making decisions as you
absolutely
could, right? Like I think of that period of, you know, early childhood of my children and me and growing my business and hiring employees and selling real estate. And it just, I don't really, I mean, I remember it all, but I think I just was in motion.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I was thinking about the decisions I was making, but as now I'm older and really what I would say is wiser, I'm like, a little bit more thought should be put into most of those decisions.
Right.
Right? Is that just because you're young and dumb and male that you're just like, go, like, this is what you're supposed to do, right? Okay, let's just go.
For the life of me, I can't help it. But when I do something, I'm like all in and I'm full go, right?
Yeah, let's go.
And for better or for worse, right? I can't help it. So, you know, like you get into the mortgage business, like I'm going to hit this hard.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning it was like, I want to do as many loans as I can and be like, you know, this great person and people will want to use me because I'm, you know, I
Uber
do
successful.
Right. And I think that was from my inexperience, right? It's almost like the perception that I was good, it was more important than actually being good.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't care about, like the difference is when I became a mortgage loan officer, I didn't want to tell people what to do with a mortgage if I didn't know how to write a mortgage and understand a mortgage. So really becoming
you knew
a
your
professional.
craft.
Yeah. That was like the main thing.
Yeah.
I asked every question I could. I went to underwriting and I was like, why are you asking for that? Right. Like I want to be able to explain it to the borrower why we're asking for this document or this additional pay stub or whatever. Right. So really getting a deep understanding of the business before I really like truly put myself out there, if you will.
Yeah.
So that piece was super important. But then as being at LMCU and again, having these leads, like the first year that I did the business or was in the business, I wasn't even closing loans for a full year. And I think I did like 18 million, right? I mean, like coming out of the blocks, it was like, we were humming along. Most of it was refinances because my mentor was like, they're easier and blah, blah, blah. And now they're actually, I think, more difficult than a purchase transaction because there's so many variables that can happen with a refi that people don't understand necessarily. But we were humming along and
so you had early success.
Yep.
And so that made you feel good ultimately, I'd imagine, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, like I am the man. Like, did the ego come back out from like your sports ego?
I think the difference is it always came from hard work. Like the success came from hard work.
Not to take away from it, right? It wasn't. Yeah. You still had to put the time in, right?
And so I think there's, like you have to make that declaration. Like it happened because I worked really hard. I stayed late when I needed to get applications done, the
early
but
the early
coming
success
out
comes
early
because you put the
even
time.
My company, like they're like, oh hey, like look at this guy, right? And I got a lot of opportunities because of that in the beginning too, so with like real estate companies and stuff like that. But again, looking back on that, like I built it in the right way, but also something like I went about things in the wrong way. So it was like I knew what I was doing. I wanted to help people, but like growing my business, like, and again, I'm still trying to figure that out, right? And having to pivot and learning new things, but like I don't even think I really had a plan. It was kind of like, just and again, we were so busy for the last 10 years up until, the last couple of years. Yeah. It's been pretty easy. Mortgages were kind of like falling out of the sky.
Yeah, they were
Should
easy.
I refinance? Well, yeah, actually, like I can lower your interest rate and you're going to get cash
Housing
out.
value was going up, right? People were able to buy. It was affordable, right?
The interest rates
and
were the best they've ever been in history.
And then you get lowest interest rates ever, and then you get to run that 2 years or 3 years of COVID until now, right? And
The
now it's
highest
like, oh,
of the
crap.
highest.
Yeah.
You know, for me personally, it was the highest volume I've ever done in my career to
Yeah.
the lowest volume in the span of, you know, literally 2 years.
The last two.
My income, you know, like, and my volume got cut in half. Yes.
Yeah.
In 2000, I think it was 22, I did 23 million. And the year before, I had done 42 million.
Yeah. And that was the year everyone had their biggest year ever, right? Because you're refinancing everybody twice.
Well,
once at 4% and then once at 2.8 or whatever, right?
But here's the thing. People are still continuing to have a lot of success, right? Despite the market.
Yeah.
And, you know, it depends on how you built your systems and you built your business and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But like I built my business, I feel like, on having a large sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
I went to Rockford High School.
Yeah.
It was pretty big. I went to Grand Valley. I played sports there. I bartended in Grand Rapids. So I just knew a lot of people.
Yeah.
And thankfully, those people trusted in me to be their mortgage advisor.
Yeah.
And that was kind of just how I did it, right? And I picked up referrals here and there or whatever, but it was like sphere of influence. And then this hits, you know, the pandemic hits, and like if my sphere of influence is calling me and asking me, should I buy the next house? And you're looking at it and you're like, well, we're at 6-7% interest rate and you have a super low. Do you need to move? No.
Yeah.
Well, then, you know, and like I'm selling against myself, but it's like focusing on the long game, right? Like I want to be their mortgage advisor for life, not just for one transaction, that I can get the business.
So what was the moment that it fell apart?
Which part? The marriage or
the marriage, or well,
because ultimately divorce was what we were going to talk about, right?
Like, divorce is part of it, right? And so, but they're like, for me, I know the moment, right? For me personally, it was like, oh man, like this is where I'm not good, and then we're not good, and then there's a train that's running that I have to stop to then rebuild from, right?
Yeah.
So was there a personal moment before the marriage breakup moment? Like that you realized, like, wow, okay, like I don't know who Steve is, right? Or I'm struggling to figure that out. Or did it happen after you're like, okay?
It happened after my divorce.
It happened after.
Yeah.
I
was started working on who I was, but
during the marriage you were working on it, who you were?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you should always be working on who you are. But I wasn't working on myself during the marriage like I was afterwards.
Okay.
So did
it give you time then? Is that where? So we're divorced dad, right? Which is a label.
Yeah.
That is another label, right? 2 kids out of wedlock, now divorced dad, right?
Yeah.
And your kids go to a Christian school, which we could talk about too, right? Of how does that feel? But we'll get into that later. Elliot and Sawyer told me I shouldn't get into that today because they're like,
we already talked about religion in West Michigan. You know, we're also putting that label on West Michigan too, right? So it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe some people do have a different perspective, but we grew up in the church, and that's how we feel about it, right? Like, I mean, there's a church on every street corner, and there's a brewery on every street corner. So, like, you know, it's an interesting mix in West Michigan.
Yeah. So, ultimately, you got married, and then 3 years later, you're like, wow, okay.
We had another kid,
Sloan,
and you know, we just, and again, if I'm not the person that I need to be, and I'm not working on myself in the way that I need to be, like I take my responsibility for not being the person I needed to be in that marriage and that partnership and that relationship. Like,
there's no one-sided.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, there can be abuse and there can be situations where people need to get out of, right? And like, totally. But majority of divorces, and I get a lot of people that call me now because I'm pretty vocal with it, right? And you listen, right? You listen, and it's you both are not okay, right? You both need work. It's not, you know, there's always one that feels like it's a heavier story on one side or the other, but at the end of the day, like, it took 2 to tango, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. You take your responsibility for your part in the, you know, relationship not working out. And like, having to learn how to take that responsibility even and figure those things out. But ultimately, like, I got divorced. That was expensive. And then I decide to buy a house in the country. So I have my midlife crisis, if you will, right?
Okay. At 35.
Yeah. Yep. I am divorced with 2 baby mamas and 3 children.
Yeah, you go into hardcore. No,
Yeah.
get it all out of the way, right?
Like, you know what, Steve? If you want to live an extraordinary life, you have to go through some extraordinary things, right?
That's awesome.
And not that I wanted to, but I did, right?
No,
like,
but it teaches you so much.
And that's the thing is, like, I have all this baggage, like, as baggage, that's your label, right? Like, I have all this baggage, but it's not baggage. It's what makes my story great, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've been through the shit, and now
Do you
I'm
feel
a
like
better
you still
person.
carry the baggage? What thing are you still carrying that you wish you could get rid of?
I don't think I'm really carrying that weight, honestly.
Okay.
I feel pretty good, like where I know where I'm headed. I don't know, the path isn't necessarily clear, but I know what's important and I know where to go and like what direction.
Yeah.
So
let's talk for a little bit.
But I've had to mentally unpack a lot of things as we've got, like.
Was that counseling? How did you?
So I started in counseling. The most helpful thing, like, I am a huge proponent.
Are you still?
We went to counseling as a couple several different times.
Yeah.
Like, several attempts.
Yeah.
We tried to make it work, like, and that's the thing about it is, like, I don't want to say, like, oh, you should just get divorced, right? It'll make you happier.
Right.
Because I definitely think you need to work things out and make your attempt to do that. And if you ultimately both come to the conclusion that, like, it's just not going to work, then it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, so it started in counseling, and I felt like the thing about, so I'm a red and a blue. Do you know what that means?
No.
Success
Explain to me.
signals.
No. Explain to me.
I'll have to have you come to it's like a personality test.
Okay.
And so there's these different colors, these different labels that they give you.
Yeah.
And I'm a red, which is like the salesperson, the person that everyone wants to hang out with at the bar, like, and that part of it. But they can also be a little wishy-washy on certain things, right? But I'm also a blue. Okay. And a blue is someone that never forgets things. That's like one of the main things, right? Okay. And like, I'm as I started to mentally unpack myself and learn who I am, I'm a highly sensitive person and I'm an empath, right? So like, I'm, that, I think that was part of the disconnect that I had growing up, is like, I had all these feelings and thoughts and things, and I like felt like I wasn't, again, my own label or whatever, felt like I wasn't able to be that person or express those feelings because I needed to be this, like,
the jock
male version of, like, machismo, and I'm strong and I'm fit, and
the persona that you felt like, or the label you felt like you needed to have,
you're a man, right? Like, be a man. So and as I unpack that and realize how wrong that was or whatever, wherever that comes from, society, but I think we're also focusing nowadays on mental health, and I am a huge proponent of it. We have the Mental Health Foundation in West Michigan, which is huge. They have a national campaign, Be Kind. It's pretty cool to see that kind of stuff happening from West Michigan. But I mean, my mental health, it's super important. And
so the grounding, so you're in the middle of divorce, right? Like, and you decide to buy a random cabin out in the woods. Was that part of the yoga zen moment? Was like, okay, I need to be quiet. I need to find a grounded, quiet spot, and that's what called to you then?
Yeah, so as I started to unravel my mind a little bit here, and figure out who I was and what was important to me, like, I wanted to get back to nature. Yeah. And honestly, it you look back on your life and you connect the dots, but it's always hindsight. I probably should not have made this decision, but like, the property and where I'm at now, like, I love it. It's beautiful. My kids love it. Yeah. It's a little bit further away from, town than
Right.
like I think I truly thought. It's like about 30 minutes for me to get
Yeah.
anywhere. You
Yeah.
know, like it's
Yeah,
only
yeah.
30 minutes away
Yeah.
from anywhere.
Right.
But it's 30 minutes
Especially
away
being a
from
social
everywhere.
person, that probably,
Yeah.
like, at the moment, was it a hideout for you? Do you think, like, you...
Oh, well, we haven't gotten into that yet. So I'm living in the house. I start the yoga journey.
Yeah.
I go through my midlife crisis,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I grow my hair out.
Yeah.
Which
My hair is longer than yours. I'm actually kind of
Yeah.
proud of myself right
Yeah.
now. I got more curls in the back.
it looks good, man.
I could
Are you
actually
growing
bun
it out
right now.
Are you growing it out again?
Not like full.
Yeah,
Like, this is
but, like,
probably about the length.
to
A
pull
little
it-
bit
to
more.
pull it
but
back? You'll be able to pull it back?
Just pull it back a little bit.
Yeah. So that was that. I think the growing the hair out. We had the pandemic. Like
Yeah.
through my divorce, I just started growing it out longer. I just was
Right.
like whatever, and
Yeah.
then it was the pandemic, and I'm like, well, I've never grown my hair out long. Might as well
Yeah.
grow it out, and then I'm like, once it's long enough, I'll donate it, right?
Right.
And I try to give back to the community as much
Yeah.
as I can, and I think it's pretty cool if you can like. Someone could be out there, wearing my hair around.
Yeah. Are you on the third journey? Is this going to be like a normal thing that every 2 years?
I did it twice. No, and I
gonna
think
do
I'm
a
going to keep
third?
it short
Yeah.
for a while.
Okay.
All
right.
It's
Yeah,
kind of like I've,
It's a lot of work.
and I've also gone through this process of like it was almost like having the long hair was a part of my growing.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't.
for sure.
And now that like I feel like I'm ready to help others more. It's like here's the new me, right? The new
Was
version
it like
of
a
me.
cloak? Like your super cape in a way? Like...
I haven't really gotten in, like, really thought
Yeah.
about it that deeply.
Yeah.
But it
Because
definitely
mine was a persona. Like, I was hurting, like, really
Yeah.
bad emotionally, right? Like,
Yeah.
here I just moved out. I'm trying to figure out life. I mean, I started mine during COVID. I dropped like 50 pounds. Like, I was 180, which was like probably not since high school did I weigh that, right? Yeah, it was a persona for me to hide the hurt, right? It was like, oh, like, he's all of a sudden chiseled and has long hair, and it's like,
Yeah.
that's not Steve, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
who is that dude, right?
Yep.
But it was a way for me to hide, in a way, the pain that I was feeling inside, right? It was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, like, Steve's obviously going through something because he's not the normal Steve, but I didn't want to be I didn't know what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right? It was
You were
just like,
figuring things out.
I've got to, like, I almost put stuff on to be able to take it off,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. And I think there's pros and cons to all of it, though, right? Like,
Yeah.
a side benefit of like getting chiseled and working out is like being healthy.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing.
No.
And like, you look good with long hair, you look good with short hair,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey, you can do it either
Right,
way.
right.
And so, yeah, it just kind of became, part of. It all worked together in a weird way.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
moved out to the country. It wasn't like I was trying to be this person. I just became this person. And I was like, I don't really care what my hair looks like, like
Right.
and I think maybe it was deep down inside me proving to myself that I don't care what other people think.
Yeah.
Right?
Or that you can make your own choices. Was it like your
Maybe-
first time that you
maybe.
felt like you had the right to choose?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think some empowerment. Like
Right.
to just be like, all right, like
I
this
do
is
care what
me.
other people say,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
can choose me.
Right. Yep, for sure. Definitely a huge breakthrough. And I think we also need to share like your perspective of your divorce too.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this is a conversation between me
Yeah.
and you.
Yeah.
And you have your perspective, so
Yeah.
we need to talk a little bit about that.
You're gonna
How do
put
we-
me on
well,
the-
well, how do we
Yeah.
unpack that for you? Because this needs to be a two-way street, and I
Yeah.
can talk to you all day long, as we know here. Like I can talk
Well, I'm
about
supposed to do the interviews.
my story, like it's
No.
it's pretty long too.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
like
yeah.
how deep we get into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if an hour and a half
Yeah,
could do it justice.
so mine comes out of more so the need for me to find myself again, right? And not knowing who I was. And I think we talked a little bit about that, but for me, I had a huge mental breakdown, right? And was suicidal to the point, and really just didn't know what was true and what was false.
Yeah.
And that was during COVID. And so trying to figure out what was true and what was false in being married we struggled, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know how to relate to her anymore.
Yeah.
And the way that she operated, ultimately felt like I was operating within my mom, right? Because you often marry your parents, right? That's a pretty normal idea. Is like you marry
Or
someone
you
that is,
become just like them,
yeah, or you
right?
become just like them,
Yeah.
right? And so she operates and operated in that way, and I just couldn't be around it anymore, right? And so for me, it was that like I need to find my self again, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know if I knew who myself was at that point because I was dramatically abused as a child by my mom, and my dad allowed it to occur. More being complacent than and choosing not to deal with it than him like actually doing it. But he allowed my mom to, which was one of the healing things for me. Is actually,
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah,
Like
thank
I
you.
just want to say,
Yeah. So when COVID happened, I had a moment of trying to stay busy, right? I was always busy. I think that we talked about that. Like for you, it was like for me, it was just grind. And that, from the success from other people saying you're the man and just grinding, I didn't have time to unpack anything emotionally, even though I was in therapy. I've been in therapy for I don't even know how long, like 10 plus years, right? Just finding that space where I was caught off guard and sort of the PTSD moment happened for me in the garage because I was doing Garage Thoughts, which was a podcast back in the day. I don't know if you remember those at all, but
yeah.
I would do Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood podcast to keep myself busy in the garage during COVID. And yeah, ultimately the story plays out that Gretchen Whitmer, our governor and governor at the time, she came on the what was the computer, right? And she would come on every 2 days, it felt like, for an update about COVID and can we go out or can we not, those kind of things. And she mentioned that if I don't remember I think it was Easter, I want to say, because it was a holiday and I don't remember what holiday, but I think it was Easter. And she said, basically, I really need to find the clip. It'd be actually healthy for me to re-listen to the clip now that I'm saying this. But basically, she said, if you go and hang out with your family, I know some of you want to go hang out with your family during this holiday for Easter, but just so you're aware, if you do so, you might kill them. In like a very point, that's how I heard it. And it probably was better politically said, but
Yeah.
was close enough to that. Like, basically, you're dangerous. If you leave the house, you'll probably kill somebody with COVID. And so you want to stay home. You don't want to do that. And that was my mom's abuse. My mom would say that to me and my sister almost every other day when we were kids. Like, you can't leave the house or you'll get other kids sick. With the new age, she would call it. And if you get them sick, they will get it, and then they might die.
These are things that your mom would say.
That was yeah. So my mom has she's now passed away by proxy. Why is the last thing called? But basically, it's a mental disease in which you make your children sick in order to get attention.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we were diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome very early on. And so me and my sisters, we didn't go to school. We were homeschooled basically. Like, we weren't allowed to play with our friends outside for years. Like, yeah. So
So fast forward to you
yeah,
being
so
in relationships,
I knew all of
having
that. Yeah.
grown up that
So
way.
I knew
Wow.
I mean, that's part of this podcast, right? Is the labels, right? So she would use the labels to then control the narrative of what we could or couldn't do, right? So I escaped that abuse when my parents moved to Texas. I had a good friend group in high school and started finding my way out of it through sports, actually, and finding my way back into sort of society, and realizing something wasn't healthy. I knew something was wrong, didn't know what. Right? I didn't have words. I didn't understand it. And finally moved. My parents moved to Dallas right when I graduated from high school, and I moved down there for a month or two. And I'm like, man, there's something wrong here. I can't stay here. I'm going back into this world that's very dark. I don't know what it is, and so moved back to Grand Rapids, and ultimately then just started grinding. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I never really unpacked that or realized that. I knew that it was wrong. I knew that something bad happened with my family. I knew my mom was not okay, right? She then became very addicted to opioids, and I bought her a house to live in when I was successful.
Yeah.
Did all the right things as a good son would do, kind of a thing. But yeah, until COVID and Gretchen sang those words, I didn't realize. I literally was like, holy shit, like Gretchen's my mom. And I went back to being 12. Like literally I was a 12-year-old. And I remember at 12 asking God to take me. I want to die. Right. And so my mind went right back to that. Like, okay, like if COVID is going to be a thing and we're going to stay here, then I'm done. Like, just take me now. I don't need to do this one again. I already did this one, and I remember it. So that was the start. That's why I asked, was there a moment? Because there was a moment for me. We had already had issues. My ex-wife and I was already struggling in it. We were struggling through COVID. Like some people during COVID went like really together, and for us, it was like a very separate like worlds. I went into the provider mode. I went into the, make sure we have enough toilet paper mode, like set stuff up. And then the minute that happened, I just lost it. And I lost myself for a while from that. So luckily, we're here at this podcast studio because of Megan Heritage.
For that. Right.
Megan Heritage asked me to be on her podcast, right? So we're sitting here. But Megan was the one who called me and said, get home, you're going to commit suicide. And I know you, and you need to go home, because I was hiding.
After the podcast?
No, this was like 5 years ago.
Oh,
so, yeah. So 5 years ago, I took
Where were you with her when that happened, though, where she called you and said, go home?
So I went, so I realized what was going on, right? And then trying to remember exactly the motions that I took, but basically I took off that next day and just packed a backpack and went hiking. Because that was the only place that I ever felt calm in my life, was on a mountain hiking with a backpack. Like nature, right? If I say I can breathe when I'm 30 minutes in the woods. I got to get 30 minutes of heart racing, just moving through the woods, and then I will catch my breath, right? And so I took off, and I sent Amy, my ex-wife, which was wife then, a note and just said, hey, I'm out. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stay at the house anymore. I packed up and I just took off hiking. And then I hiked the it was a loop trail up in Manistee, so the Manistee River Trail, which is an awesome trail. I hiked it in like no time flat, right? I was running and was healthy at that point because of COVID. But I ended up at our cottage. So we owned a cottage in Grant. It was supposed to rain that night. So it's like, okay, let me go to Grant and hang out. I didn't have a way of committing suicide. I wasn't at that moment. Like I had those thoughts, like, I can't do this anymore. I need to die. I didn't know what that looked like or how it would occur. I just was like, I'm not okay. So I was at the cottage and Megan called me. She called me about herself personally because she had a tumor. She's like, hey, I need to let you know. I know you're not emotionally okay, because we were doing a podcast together and we were interviewing people together during COVID, like medical professionals and business leaders. It was sweet. And people are like, man, this is unreal. You guys are like killing it. And then I just ghosted that too, right? And so she's like, hey, I I know you're not okay. I don't know what's going on, but like I need to tell you something. I have this tumor thing and we don't know what it is, and it's the size of a grapefruit. And then she said, where are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm at the cottage. I just went for a hike. And she's like, no, no, no. I've had 2 other friends commit suicide that are men at your age. You're going to do something to yourself. And I you I just told you I might be dying or I don't know what's going on. So you can't kill yourself right now. Like you got to come home. You got to go home. And I was like, okay, Megan, I'll go home. Like I'll go. I don't know what's at home. I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Whatever. So yeah, fast forward. I went home the next day. I still was not okay, and I just said, I can't stay here. I'm not okay. I did some online research and found out that South Dakota was the only state in the nation that was open to doing anything outside of their household. And there was national parks in South Dakota that opened up, and you could go into any national or state run park without a pass because no one was at the parks because of COVID. I called a couple KOA, so they're like, yeah, we opened up, like no one's here if you want to come. So I said, Amy, I gotta leave. I gotta go find mountains. I gotta leave. I'm not okay. And she's rightfully said, you can't go alone, and which was a good call. And I said, okay, well, I'll take the boys. I'm not going to hurt myself with my then 9-year-old boys,
Yeah.
or 10-year-old boys. So we packed up the car with a tent and random stuff and drove the Honda Pilot to South Dakota for a week. And that's where then I had
Figured
enough
it out.
quiet. I could figure it out. And I called my siblings and I just said, hey, like, this is what's going on. I have 4 other siblings, 3 of which I called. And I said, this is what's going on. And they said, we wondered how long it would take before you realized that was what we were going through. None of us would talk to the other person about it. We all figured it out in our own timing.
Yeah.
We all had a situation in which, but during COVID, all of us had the same thing. We were all suicidal during COVID.
I think, well, I mean, yeah, I think there was record numbers, right? And
Right.
it was like mine was finalized right during COVID.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and so it was like, I think there was a couple phone calls that were like over with the judge, like over the phone, you know,
Zoom,
like,
whatever. Yeah.
and like, I mean, we could do a whole podcast about like what COVID has done to, you know, like
Society
I
as a
became
whole,
a
yeah.
single dad during COVID and you couldn't go anywhere, do anything.
Right.
So when I didn't have my kids, I was just at home by myself.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
Right.
and it was like very isolating at
Yeah.
the time. And like having never been just all alone like that and
Yeah.
not really like having any outlets socially, really.
Yeah.
It was, a lot of things
Yeah.
happened for a lot of people mentally, you know, and I think that was part of me being like, well, there was a part of me that during COVID, I was like, if we're going to be staying at home all the time, like I want property and
Yeah.
I want to be able to live off the land
Sure.
and have a
Yeah.
garden. And like the place that I ended up buying has like, you know,
Yeah.
fresh water or whatever.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah.
a pond. And I'm sorry to hear that you had those thoughts, but I feel like I had those same thoughts, right? At times I thought to myself, would the world be a better place without me here?
Yeah. For sure.
I never got to the point where I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, right?
But
I
you-
had those thoughts where I was like, I'm not worth it. Like, I'm a bad person or
Yeah.
I'm not worthy. Like, why am I here? I'm, you know, my
Yeah.
worth
And now,
is
I
there.
mean, I've had friends that have committed suicide, right? That I wasn't close enough to have that conversation with, like Megan did with me. But I get it, right? I wish they were still here, and I wish I could have that conversation of it can get better. I get the moment you're in. There is life after this thought, right? I have 7 kids. I got a tennis court at my house that I dreamed of when I was 7 years old, right? I have a beautiful wife. Like like there is life after, right?
Yeah.
It's a really fucking hard journey. Like
Yeah.
to rebuild from that 12-year-old boy again being 40, right? I mean, I was 41. To rebuild mentally from that spot, being like, oh my gosh, like I'm 12 again, and now I have to rebuild my whole being. Like, I was already on a process, right? I had actually gone to a person for 3 days to talk about my journey before COVID happened, which was interesting. So I was on the journey of trying to figure it out, but like that was that moment for me. And then, for me, I asked to think about the hair and the cape and the going to the woods as hiding, because that's what I hid for a while, right? Was like that moment where it's like, okay, like, I think it was maybe 3 months or so, 4 months after that, then I moved out of the house. I mean, we lived generally partially separated. We didn't call it that because I didn't know what was going on, but I would be at the cottage and she would be at the house, or I'd be at the house and she'd be at the cottage, right, all summer long. And then the minute that we were back together full time at the house for school starting, I was like, I can't do it. So I moved out. But yeah, I mean, I think it took me almost 2 years to process that, to not hide anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a friend of mine, Eric Webster. I don't know if you know Eric Webster, but he's an old school real estate agent. I don't think he's licensed. He probably is licensed, but he got out of it. I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago he retired. He was one of the first old school real estate agents that told me I was full of myself. So I'm sure he'll listen and he'll laugh. But I remember him telling me, like, dude, you're young and you're full of vigor. Like, you need to chill out for a minute.
Yeah.
And I was full of it. But he texted me yesterday, actually, and his message was like, hey, dude, like, I love seeing you again. Like, you seem really good, and I love that you're doing the stuff that you love, like getting behind the mic again and it's like, wow, okay, like how long I hid for a long time, right? Some of that was like the thought, like I needed to find myself, but others was like
it was easy to hide at that time though,
it was
right?
easy
Like
to
during
hide.
COVID, like you couldn't do a lot of things.
It was easy to hide. I also again, labels and what people put on you, and kids going to a Christian school, and I was the dad who left because I moved out. My mom was still around, and then on her deathbed she said that I was a horrible son because I wouldn't come visit her, to forgive her as Christ would forgive her, right? Even though she didn't even know what she needed forgiveness for. And so there was. My counselor would just say, and I took it to heart, probably a little bit too much, but was good for me, was just to be quiet, Steve. Like, people will know your heart and who you are if they love you and care about you. You don't need to say anything right now. You don't, like, because I have no problem saying stuff, as you know, right? Like, but there was
You're
that time
to
where
the
it's
choir,
like,
my friend.
yeah, like you, Steve, like, I would want to defend my name or who I was or what I was about. And, there was different situations where I had agents that left and they were saying stuff about me. And I'm like, do I get into this? Like, but what good is that?
Yeah.
Where is that? They must find value in talking about me. But if I try to defend myself, what value is that? And it's like, but the best defense is just to shut your mouth sometimes. So there's been a long period of time where I was like, I'm just going to be quiet. And I think that's why this is called I'm Just Steve, right? The podcast came with that idea over the last even 6 months, was like, I'm just going to be Steve again and let people decide if they want to interact with Just Steve or they don't.
Yeah.
That's on them, but I don't have anything to hide anymore, but I was quiet and was hiding for a long time. Yeah. You too.
For sure. Well, I think, your experience is probably a little bit different than mine. I don't know if I was necessarily you know, if I was hiding, more or less trying to find myself,
Yeah.
or become, you know, the
it's a
person that I
combination,
was,
right?
you know, because when you unravel it, you're always who you were meant to be. Like
Yeah.
that person exists inside of you, so
Yeah.
you're actually not lost. You just have to find yourself again, right? And
Right,
that's
right,
kind of
right, right. Yeah, it's
the
in your
mentality.
soul. You
Yeah.
know who that is, right?
Like,
You
as
know
we
those
said,
moments.
like we have good people in our souls. I think
yeah.
everyone does,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And you just have to be able to be grounded enough in yourself and,
Yeah.
and feel the energy and what you mean. Like, you know, as we go back into my journey from my divorce, I moved out to the country, but
Right.
we didn't get into the fact that like I bought a house that was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home, and I have 3 kids.
Right.
You do the math.
Yeah.
So I had to renovate this house to have enough space and bedrooms and whatnot.
Yeah.
And through that renovation, I spent all the money I had, and then my income got cut in half.
Right.
And I took out debt to finish this house that I didn't have before, you know. So I'm literally going as backwards as you can go. Also, having gotten divorced a few years ago, like I am
Right.
literally lighting paychecks on fire, right? If we
Right.
still had them,
Yeah.
you know, just
Yeah.
and
And that's where you sit now, right? Ultimately, like
What?
you sit in the spot where the debt is heavy, you've got to grind again, and you're rebuilding again. Because I mean, you did the LinkedIn post,
Yeah,
right?
so, you know,
about this idea of like, okay, here's my journey.
I'm not completely debt free,
Yeah.
but I'm not like living. I mean, literally, there was like, if I have a bad month, like I don't know how I'm gonna be, you know, make these payments,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it was like, when you exist for over a year that way, like, you know, we're 100% commission, right?
Right.
You know, you are.
Yep.
I mean, it's a little bit different, but yeah, I mean, I don't make money unless I close loans,
Right.
And so there's a lot of pressure that goes along with that, right? If if you're not
Yeah.
closing loans, you're not making money. So, you know, having to still function and be a normal person and like want to do the best for
Yeah.
people, with also being like, I can't be attached to like this transaction or whatever, even though like, you know, I might not eat next month if I don't close this loan. Like
Right.
you really learn how to figure out who you are in those moments where you're like so broken, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember there was multiple aha moments. I don't think I've had one
Yeah.
moment, but I had a meeting with my buddy who was in town, who was a financial advisor, and he was like, we were talking about my situation,
Yeah.
and he was basically like, your options are to get a second job or to sell your house.
Yeah.
And, like, to make enough money to like continue to provide. And like, I found another option, you know, I borrowed money and like more money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I borrowed more money to pay off some debt, like consolidate. Right.
Yeah.
And get myself, you know, free up my income or whatever, so that I can, because what I knew ultimately, it was like, I had been in this business for, I don't know, 9 years or whatever, when this is all going down, 10 years. And I'm like, I'm good at what I do and I want to help people. Like, I can't give up on this.
Right.
Maybe if I just put a little bit more energy and effort into what I'm doing.
Yeah, but you had to take that break, right? Do you feel like you took a little bit of a break from like you worked, but you took a little personal break, right?
Well, we kind of had to with COVID, but also like moving out to the country, like I go home and I'm by myself, and like I learned in the moments of silence how to be me, and just, you know who I was, figured out who I was. But you also realize the connection with people that you're missing, and so that's why I've been, like, so I guess confident in being on social media. It's a way of connecting with people, right? Sharing messages, and I think confidence is probably one of the labels that I get, maybe even cockiness at times, right? Like, I think probably people look at my confidence and think I'm cocky or whatever.
I've never thought that of you.
See, again, maybe I've put that label on myself.
It's not a label I would ever
but it
put
comes
on.
from like me being comfortable on the camera now, comes from me knowing like I've been through so much shit. I don't want anyone else to go through that if I can help them avoid it. But I also know that like the negative mindset isn't going to be healthy for me either. So it's like, just do it, man.
Yeah. So we're going to slowly wrap this
Yeah.
up because
Yeah.
they probably have like
We
another
could- yeah,
recording
yeah,
and
yeah.
they're like cameras are about to blow up because they've
Yeah.
been recording for so long. But you've said it a number of times. So I would love to, in your words, understand the labels you are now. When you say, I had to find me and I think I found me, who is Steve Kick now?
Empathetic.
Empathetic.
If we want to
Yeah.
put labels on
Yeah.
this,
You're empathetic.
I'm empathetic,
Grounded.
caring, grounded, patient. Man, patient.
Yeah.
Still
That was-
working on that,
that was
but
a
like,
learned.
yeah. The way I've been my whole life is kind of like just don't think about it and just go, right?
Yeah.
And like stepping back
Yeah.
and looking at things, patience is, it's definitely a huge value that I really look to, work on and continue to find others who are patient, right? And if we parallel this to our business, Steve, the more patient we are with people, the better the outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's always this big push to like get things done, and like we're racing to a deadline or a finish
Right,
line or
right,
whatever,
right.
and it's like a parable to life, right?
Yeah.
Like what are we racing towards, right? What happens at the end of life? It's over. We need to enjoy the experience while we're on it, and sometimes there's going to be dark times in there that we have to work how to get through. And I think you and I have had those really significantly dark moments, but also made it through and said, I don't want anyone else to have those dark moments if I can help
Which is
them
why we're
avoid
here.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote down one question because someone said it the other day and I thought it was great. If you could remove fear, what's the one thing that you would do today?
Man, that's a tough question.
Yeah.
I don't think I've
What
ever.
is there something that you're holding your back from, like that you're like, man, I wish I could do this, but this thing is in the way?
Something for some reason I don't like I don't travel as much as I'd like to travel, if that's what you're
Yeah,
asking
sure.
for. Like I want to travel more, and I think
Yeah.
part of it has been like we talked about the financial thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm still recovering
Yeah.
from these financial setbacks. So in my mind, I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on a trip because
Yeah.
I can't afford it or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah.
again, it's difficult because you have to be realistic about
Yeah.
things. But I'd like to travel more and see a little bit more of the world.
Yeah.
And even in America, there's so many great places to
Yeah.
go and be. And like I want to do that with my kids.
Yeah.
I want to do it on my own.
Yeah, my counselor the other day, I was complaining to my counselor. I see him every 2 weeks. And I was like, I'm bored. And he's like, well, what do you mean bored, right? And I'm like, well, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing these things. And he said, yeah, your life is how you built it, Steve, which bored is good for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, but no, it's boring.
Yeah.
Right. But this idea in which he said, maybe you need to start thinking about like, how could you do boring more? Like what, not removing things, but how could you just do more? Like all these things are good, but then you're saying you're bored, just do all of them more. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's really not that hard, is it? Oh, I could go play tennis once more a week because I
Yeah.
love it, right?
Yeah.
And I could go golfing in the winter because I love it, right? Like,
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see how our brains sort of wire us back to whatever it was, what we thought was healthy,
Yeah.
but not necessarily healthy, right?
Yep.
Kind of thing. Okay, so you came all the way to Grand Haven to hang out with me. Is there something you wanted to say or talk about that we have not, that you were excited to get into or that you wanted to address?
Yeah, I think before we wrap this up, because I have a meeting at noon in Grand Rapids.
Well,
but
we got to get going. It's 40 minutes away.
yeah,
You're a fast driver.
Yeah, I am. So I'll try and make this quick. And I think, for me, like we came on here and we wanted to talk about divorce. And I think I just want to like wrap up and just say, me and my ex-wife have a great relationship now.
Yeah.
She has billboards all around town.
She does. I see Gabby buys houses everywhere.
Yeah. So, it's awesome, in a way. Like, I could look at it and be mad and upset and like, oh gosh, like it keeps getting shoved in my face.
Yeah.
Right. But I want her to be successful.
Yeah.
And I want my kids to have a happy, healthy relationship with both of their parents.
Yeah.
And she helps me, I help her. So like, we were like oil and water. And we were like, it just comes down to it, right? Like, we tried to make it work. We couldn't make it work. And like, when you can move past that and focus on wanting to better yourself, that will better the relationships for everyone else in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for people to know, like, if you're divorced or you're going through a divorce, that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Things do get better. We can have joint birthday parties. You can call your significant other and be like, hey, can you watch the kids for me? And they'll call you. I'm watching my kids for her a couple weeks, coming up here. And not for a couple full weeks, but a couple times over the next few weeks. And it's awesome. I get extra time with my kids.
Yeah.
Like, you talk about, like, you want a life hack for a divorced co-parent. If your kids get into sports or activities, you get to show up to those activities and help out with those activities, even on the days that aren't yours. If you if you're in a co-parenting situation, so I love it. I love watching my kids. You talk about a boring life, like I thought about that too. I'm like, man, my life is so boring. I don't do anything special.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, well, I go to all these networking events, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I get to watch my favorite athletes
My
play
Yeti
every
share
day.
on the side of the soccer game or on is my favorite thing to do. Like,
I love
could
watching
sit,
my kids
watch
do their
the
thing.
kids do their thing.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So I think there's always a balance to both equations, right? Like, I have a pretty healthy, I would say, co-parenting relationship with Amy as well. There are moments where you're like, oh man, this is why I'm divorced.
You have to set boundaries, right? Like,
right? And you're like, oh wow, okay. We don't know each other's languages at times, right? Or we do, and that's part of the problem. But in general, like, we're pro kids, right? And that, I think, if both parents can become pro children, then you working your shit out together and just understanding that they come first and all the garbage is why you got divorced, and you don't need to bring that into them right now, is only going to be healthy for them and healthy for you. But there's also people that just can't do that, and we're not saying that that's wrong for them, right? There are people that I know that just can't be in a co-parenting relationship with that other person because that other person's just not healthy, right? And so I have some of them.
And I think, in my situation,
we're grateful for our situations that we're not grateful for being divorced, but in the way that we can be, hopefully we're better men and better parents and people because of where we are in life. But I would just say, as we wrap up, like, I am always available to talk, and I know that you are. And I think that some of this idea was that dudes don't talk.
Yeah,
like, dudes don't talk about this stuff or know who to talk to, right? So if you are a dude and you're contemplating divorce, right, or in the middle of it and just need a gut check, like, either of us would be more than willing 100%. To take you off to coffee or whatever.
Or if they're just struggling mentally. I mean, if I leave on one thing or one last thing I can say is, anybody who's struggling mentally, if they need someone to talk to, please reach out to me. I try to proactively reach out to my friends because I know that there was a time where I felt very lonely. Yeah. And it felt like nobody was reaching out to me. But you look back at it and you're like, well, it was COVID and nobody was, but there was a moment where you're like, do I have any friends? Does anyone care about me? You're like, I've gone through all this shit. Yeah. And,
who's going to hold me up right now? Right. Yeah. Right. So,
and there's people that do that. I'm thankful for some of the people who saw me in those moments and were there for me when I needed it the most. Yeah. That's why I'm here today. Yeah. So, but I want to be there for other people now.
Yeah. So, as a wrap up, because we've wrapped up like 3 times, I think now. Yeah. And you got to go back to Grand Rapids. But I would just tell everybody, thank you for this time with you.
Likewise.
To learn more about your journey.
We'll have to get together and unpack the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, we
off
could
mic.
do like a couple episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, we might need to come back like
Yeah.
once a month and just keep going on
just
this
scratch
subject.
the surface.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot there, right?
Yeah.
But I come with gratitude. Thank you for being willing to be open and sharing.
Likewise, my
Yeah,
friend.
yeah.
You know?
The yoga, yeah,
Yeah.
and just that you're willing to participate in life with me and with others and tell about your journey. If anybody wants to hear about yoga and wants to connect with Steve, we'll make sure that we put it in the comments of how to connect with Steve. If anybody's looking to do a loan, Steve would love to be one of those people that you call, right?
I'm an advisor, you
Yeah.
know, and I'll give you advice, whether it's, you know, you end up doing a loan through me or someone else.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot you straight.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So this is I'm Just Steve, the podcast, and I got to wrap up.
But you're more than just Steve. I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that I said that to you.
Oh, thank you.
Because I'm Just Steve can also make it look like I'm just Steve, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're more than just Steve.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And also, we need to do our final shout out ultimately to our podcast hosts, right? We're
Yep.
here. But then also,
Thanks for hanging out.
I can't leave without inviting Matthew McConaughey on the show, because Elliot told me, like, when I told him that we were going to do a podcast, he's like, well, you got to have Matthew on the show eventually. So
That'd
is
be
the
pretty-
goal.
that'd be pretty awesome.
So yeah, everybody is asking, can they come back when Matthew comes? So Matthew McConaughey, of course, this is your invite to come hang
Matt,
out.
we'd love to see you.
We'd
Come
love to
on,
see
come
you.
check
Come
it
on
out.
in, and thank you.
Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. See ya.